we're going to go ahead and start. So if you'll get that door, Oscar. All right. So this is our weekly training at noon. And this is Callie Copeland with Truly, and Roxanne is also the closer here that we try to go with. Of course, Nanette is just as good. It's just that I tend to go towards people that have a personality most like mine. And well, I mean, and buyers will work with you because you're most like them. So not physically, but as a personality. So I thought she'd be great along with Callie to kind of team up and tell us what happens after the contract gets executed. So just quickly to know what happens before it gets executed. We know we do a buyer pre-approval. We know we set up a home search. You know that they're going to favorite a home. Your phone's going to go off. You're going to get in touch with them. You're going to show the house. We're going to go back and forth like a tennis match, counter, recounter. At some point, it becomes executed. And on there, paragraph 5, you put the title company. If you're with a buyer, at the bottom of the MLS agent full report, it usually says preferred title. Nothing wrong with throwing in their name, even if you see one. But I will say that as much as we love them, our fidelity is to our client. And so if there's 55 offers, friggin' put the one they want. Now if they go, oh, it's whatever, then put Truly. And you can always try to fight for them. And we have a lot of agents that use Truly and they're buyer's agents, and they're negotiating that. Specifically, if you have the buyer pay the title,
right?
Because my policy, and I think yours should be when you defend it, is say, hey, why do I want to use extra fair? My buyer's paying the title policy. But if you want to use your title company, then why don't you have the seller pay title? And if you're with a listing agent and a buyer agent says, hey, I want to use extra fair, you say, well, okay, let's go ahead and counter the title and have your buyer pay it. So at that point, if that's the case, hey, Cassandra, if that's the case, then that's how you can get Truly title. So other than that, I'm going to pass it off. And we also have Alan Badger here. He is a sponsor along with Truly Title. Incredible. I use my own house with him, and he's got our hours, 5 a.m. to midnight. So if you need something, he'll answer. And he's been real busy because I got in a wreck and so did my daughter. So it's always fun when you tell your daughter to drive safe and then the next day you get in a wreck. I'm like, okay. That's right. All right, let me check real quick to see if anybody, I don't know how to get back out to the, and just see if anybody's called. All right, y'all go ahead.
Hello, everybody. First of all, like Doug said, my name is Callie Copeland, so I am the marketing rep here at Truly Title. We have tons of tools and resources that you guys can utilize. We're here to help you grow your business as well. So I wanted to touch on real quick, kind of like Doug was saying. So one of the reasons it's important to get to know your title company is real estate's like a 3-ring circus. I mean, there's so many things going on at once. That's why it's important to have a good lender. Obviously, we've got a great lender partner with us as well, Brooks Kelly's team. So just Roxanne's going to tell you how we work, but so you guys can pick up the phone, call us, and know exactly at any given time, hey, what's going on with my file? And it's just nice to have that direct line of communication. So you can always pick up the phone. You can call me if my closers are in closing, which they tend to not answer their phone when they're doing that. I can get the answers that you guys are needing and all of that good stuff. So just to kind of
interject a little bit. This here in front of you guys is going to be, I don't know if you're a visual person at all. I'm very visual. So this kind of is going to show you the start to finish process depending upon who you are in the transaction. So the top is going to be us as title. The middle is going to be you guys as the realtor. And then the bottom is going to be the lender. So, and then we'll touch on more of that, but just so you can kind of follow along with where Callie's at.
Yeah. Also, this is super exciting. So we are a 3-year-old company. The basis behind how we got started is we are like-minded, like you guys. We wanted to be our own entrepreneurs as well. So we're kind of more of a boutique-y feel. So just to let you know that we have grown hugely in the past 3 years. We now have 15 locations. So don't think that this is the only location you can close at. We can close your clients all over Texas. And if for some reason that the property that you're closing, we don't have a location nearby, we can always send a mobile notary. So you have a closing, we can close it.
Yeah. I've closed at the Dallas location, the McKinney location. And so
yeah.
We're all over.
It's pretty convenient depending on where your clients are located.
Yeah.
Hold on real quick. I think I'm trying to.
And everyone's a team. So, we all work together in that regard. So, for instance, I have a closing on Monday in McKinney. If I can't get over there to sign it, one of the closers over there will take care of us. So we scratch each other's backs. So don't ever feel like we can't accommodate.
Absolutely. And I just want to touch on also real quickly, we have a tool. It's called Fluid Pro. For those of you who do not know what farming is, if you are interested in learning about farming, I know I've sat down with Dave and he and I have gone over this. It's a tool that helps you guys if you are wanting to door knock, if you're wanting to cold call. It will pull all homes in the area that you're searching for. It's going to give you information about the property. It's going to give you owner information, all that stuff. It's just another tool to help you guys market yourselves. So if that's what you're interested in, I put my cards on the table. So feel free to reach out to me and we can set up a one-on-one and go over that. And I have not had any realtor that I've met with give me bad feedback on this app. It is a great, great tool. What's up, Brian? How are you?
Good.
Okay, how do I do that?
I think you need exit.
Sorry, guys.
No, you're good. That's just, I have to deal with regularly. Wherever you are.
Cool. Okay. So, also something that we can provide for you guys when you are out in the field and you are needing a seller's net sheet, you're going on a listing appointment and they're curious, hey, we sell the property for this price. What is that going to look like? What am I going to walk away from the table with? So you can reach out to myself or Roxanne. You guys also have access. I can give you access to an app that you can plug in the information yourself to, and you can give them a rough estimate of, hey, this is kind of what you're looking at when we execute a contract.
Super important on that. If you ever go on a listing, you absolutely have to do a net sheet. I mean, I've been on listing before where I'll forget everything but the net sheet and I get the listing.
Yeah.
But if you have everything and don't have a net sheet, you won't. Because when you knock on a door, a seller wants to know, what can you sell it for? What are my fees total? And what do I walk away with? And that answers all those. So absolutely use that.
It's a great tool for
Free
sure.
service.
Yeah.
So
And it looks really nice. I mean, it's
yeah, you
great.
can edit it, right? Your
Yeah.
picture and-
Yep. Everything. Okay. So this is highly, highly, highly important. What is the one thing that makes this transaction better? Communication. So that means from us, that means from you guys, that's if you're working with your buyers, your sellers, as long as everyone is staying on the same page, it's going to make the process go smoothly. And we're going to get to the closing table because that's what we're all trying to get, right? So communication is key. So I am now going to turn it over to Roxanne and she's going to go through kind of the actual process of closing. And we have to pass this down to Ryan. So when we get to the lender portion, if he wants to touch on anything, he can. So take it away, Roxanne.
Alrighty. So with that said on communication, when you're sending the contract over to us from the very beginning, obviously we're going to say thank you, introduce ourselves. If it's a weekend and you're sending that contract over, you're always going to see us respond and at least acknowledge and say thank you and all of that good stuff. And then come Monday morning or the next morning is really when we'll start the process. The reason I feel as a closer, because I'm the one working the file, from start to finish with you, I'm going to be holding your hand and your client's hand the entire process. So the more information that you have up front about your client, whether you're representing the buyer or the seller, is really going to help that transaction go that much smoother. So if you're the buyer side, if we have the buyer's phone number, their email, the lender's information, that's all information that we're going to need to collect. Are we good?
Yeah.
Right up front.
We're letting people in.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. If you're the listing agent, we're immediately going to send out a seller information form. That's going to collect information on whether or not there's a mortgage on the property, their social security numbers. All of these types of things are things that we want to start to grasp right up front. Sorry, I'm like nervous. I don't normally present. It doesn't make me, I'm not normally like that.
I love it.
So if you are on the buyer side, we're going to send out instructions for earnest and option money. So we have wiring instructions. We have a Zocum app. They can bring in an old-fashioned check if they want to, but there's really no need for that anymore. Everything is much more streamlined and electronic. Okay?
Yeah, and I'll just say, I'm going to interject a little bit. One of the reasons I started my own company is because I would always say what she just said, wire it.
Mm-hmm.
And where I was, they always wanted it to be a check. That's OG. That's not what we're living in anymore.
Mhm.
You don't need to do checks. Number one, 3 days, if you can't wire money in 3 days, you got some kind of stupid going on. But you could have a problem with getting somebody to, they say they're gonna leave a check somewhere, it's not there, and now it's the next day, you gotta go find, you gotta go meet them somewhere. So, yeah, for sure. Let's do the money wire. It's a great way to get it confirmed, and you have 3 days at midnight to get it, unless the third day is a Saturday, Sunday, or a holiday. There's no reason to even worry about a Saturday, Sunday, holiday, because I don't see why anybody would need 3 days to get it there. But yeah, she sends that out.
Take a look at that, Doug. That's actually what you're talking about right here. So that shows, I mean, I want you to elaborate on this because this is more your side of it, but it does show that, it starts after the day of the effective date.
Yeah, so again, page 9, you're gonna have the signatures, and above it, there's a paragraph that big. And it says executed this blank day, a blank month, a blank day. If that's blank, she doesn't know when it starts.
Mhm.
That's probably the most important thing that you'll ever fill out, is that date.
Mhm.
So if it's today's date and today is the 11th, that's day 0. And I always like to use my fingers and go, well, today's Thursday, so today's Friday, so it's Saturday, Sunday, Monday. But if it was executed yesterday, today would be day 0, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It would be Monday at midnight, okay? And that's what they're talking about. Juneteenth, which is my anniversary, last year, it was declared a holiday on Wednesday. But it was 3 days from there. Well, when they have a national holiday on a Saturday, the day before is supposed to be closed for businesses. Well, when Biden announced it on a Wednesday, he threw a lot of people into a cardiac arrhythmia because they were like, holy crap, we have 10 closings set Friday. And so they did a one exception year where Friday was still going to be open. But next year on Juneteenth, if it falls on a Saturday, that Friday will be a national holiday and all banks will be closed. So you can see how that could screw up a lot of people last year, because when you find out 2 days before a
Yeah.
Friday that all banks are going to be closed,
Yeah.
and now everything's pushed to Monday. So anyways, go ahead.
Yeah.
Lola in the house.
So that being said, that is another reason why the executed date is so important, because we will then compile what's called a critical date form. We're going to send that out to both sides. So that's going to show the most important dates to help everyone follow along. So when is the survey due? When is the title commitment due?
And that's what this looks like. That's the format it'll come in.
So it makes it easy for you and your clients to just stay on track with those key important things that are going on. So that's another thing to touch on. Does your client have a survey? If you're representing the seller, do they have an existing survey? Have there been any changes to the existing survey? So when we talk about changes, we're talking about structural changes to the property. So I always use a pool as an example, which is what you're looking at here. You're going to see the prior survey, and then you're going to see that whoever was living there put a pool in. If that's the case, we're going to have to order a new survey. Okay. And there's a little section on your contract that talks about surveys, if a new one is needed, and who's going to pay for it. And it's a little tricky. That verbiage is a little tricky. And I don't know if you want to.
Well, yeah, so what I've done is each one of y'all should have your templates done by me. That's part of our onboarding. I pre-fill that paragraph for our protection, because it could be that you're only going to pull that up in a buyer template. So it's already got the question that you're representing the buyer. Under the survey, you don't have to do anything, because what I did is we marked it and put a number of days for the seller to find their existing survey. If you don't keep reading, all you see is a buyer check mark at the end of the paragraph. But what it says before that buyer check mark is if the seller can't find their survey, the seller's buying a new one. So just last year, I had some friends of mine bought a $100,000 house in Pilot Point. The agent that had the listing was a student of mine 3 years ago at Champions. And I'm big into video messages. So when I showed it, I left her a video message like, hey, I'm making an offer. I didn't know her. And she replied back with a video message like, oh my God, you're my instructor. And that's my dad's house. And blah, blah, blah. So anyways, we made an offer. Make a long story short. That was templated. That paragraph I'm talking about, the y'alls are all. She told her dad, oh, don't worry about that paragraph. The buyer's paying the survey. So a week before closing, she calls me and she's like, hey, does your buyer really need a survey? And I already knew where it was going. What happened is Roxanne had just called her, representing the title company, going, hey, I need your dad's credit card to pay for a survey. And her name was Dari. And she said, oh, no, Roxanne, the buyer's paying that. And Roxanne said, let's read the paragraph together. Because that's what she said that the title company did with her before she called me. And I said, yeah, they do want the survey. And I go, I thought I taught you better. No, I'm joking.
Well, and the survey is a requirement by the lender. So if it's a cash transaction, it's up to you guys and the party to negotiate whether or not the buyer requires that survey, but if you have a transaction with a lender, it's going to be required. So knowing up front if the seller has a survey, if there've been any changes to it, if not, great. You're going to submit the survey over to us along with what's called a T47 affidavit. So the T47 affidavit accompanies every existing survey. So this is also something that I, highly suggest you get these things up front because we're going to ask you for it immediately.
So, question.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you list a home, you have to get the T47 from the seller?
Well, you're going, most likely, and do you
Yeah,
guys
it's in
keep
your-
this on file?
So
It's in zip forms?
it is.
Okay.
And so let me explain real quick, the easiest way to find any document for the rest of your life. You're gonna obviously already have the transaction because you know it's a seller. You have a name. When you go into documents, in the right corner, you hit forms. When you hit forms, she already knows what she's doing. But you answer the question, Lola.
You get a form.
No, you're not. So in the right corner, if you're in documents, in the right corner, there's a forms tab. You click it. There's another tab in there that says select libraries. You've got to click that. And you just pick all and you just type in 47. And that pulls up. Why I wanted to tell you that is because if you're looking for a form that has owner in the title, guess what? The only thing you have to type in there, owner. And it'll pull up every form that we have access to with an owner in it. And you just scroll down to see what form it is. If it's lead, you just type in lead and it pulls up every form. So it's dummy proof once you get the hang of it. And the reason I want to spend a little time on it, because you'll sometimes call me and I'm going to say exactly what I just said. Yeah, there's no problem because the first time, what happens when you click on that little green tab, there's an all there, but you don't hit that all. You have to hit another tab that says select libraries and hit all, and then you just type in the word. It'll pull up everything. Good.
So your T47 affidavit, what that's stating is if there have been any changes to the survey, what were they? And if there were not any, then you're going to put none in the blank. Is it still up there?
Excuse me, can I get my question answered?
No.
And
Yes. Get
so
to your question, Lola.
the T47,
Mhm.
do you give that to your sellers to fill out? Even though it's in zip forms? Once so what, do I just, it's automatically templated, send it to them to sign, or like, because normally you're on the buyer side and they get all that.
If you're on the buyer side, then.
No, I'm not. On the
Okay, but
seller
if you're on the
side, so-
listing side, do you provide it to
blank.
your client or do you
Yeah,
help
I give
them
to the
complete
client,
it?
On the list, I go, hey, do you have a survey? They go, yes. I go, oh, wait, go find it. They get it, you give them the T47, and you tell them to find a notary. It'll be blank, and they'll fill it out.
Oh, okay, it'll be blank.
It'll be
Yeah.
blank.
That's what I was, my question was answered. Okay,
My-
so the survey they already have, the T47, we give to them for them to fill out and get it notarized
Right.
and get it back to us.
I scan it, put it
With
on the
the survey.
OLS, and then you can
So
also
question.
send it.
Okay, so as soon as you list the house, this is something they need to have, because once it goes on the contract. you
We
guys
always tell
have-
people it's smarter to have it up.
We're
front.
gonna
Yeah.
ask for it when you send us the contract and the survey. It's like the two that go together if it's existing. So you're gonna put in the blank either none. So right here. None should be right here. So it's either none or it's, we added a pool. We have a new fence. We added on a concrete patio
Right in that look,
right here.
okay.
Since this date is the date of the survey, not since they moved in,
The date of
the
survey
date
was
of the
created.
survey. Because what we want to know is, have there been any changes since this survey was created? Okay, they're gonna sign and notarize, obviously, state of Texas. Everyone in our office is a notary also. So if they need to swing by here, bring their T47 with them, or we can print it off for them, we'll sign it and notarize it for them. I used to work with an agent actually, or I still work with her. She got her notary simply to notarize T47s. Not hard to be a notary.
Can we?
Yes.
Because I'm a notary, so I
Yes.
can notarize for them.
Yes. She didn't do it to be a closer or anything like that, just simply to give her clients that service.
I just
And
didn't know
make
if there
it-
was any conflict
Nope.
there with me notarizing.
Nope. So that's another little tidbit. Okay, so we're gonna gather all that information. The next step for us is what we're gonna call the exam process. So we have a plant. We have not live plants, but a title plant.
And water it daily.
Right? Someone who's going to start examining the title. Because really at the end of the day, what we're doing is we are issuing insurance. We are making sure that let's say you're on the backside. Stop laughing. Y'all are making this hard for me to focus.
It's really lightning, but keep
You're what?
going.
So if you're representing the buyer, you want to be sure that the property that they are purchasing is clear of any liens. So most often what you're going to see is a mortgage payoff. That's very common. And if you kind of want to maybe click over to the title commitment, I can kind of marry the two together. But at the end of the day, we want to be sure that we are conveying clear title. So that's what we're going to work with the lender. We're going to work with your clients to be sure that there's nothing on there that needs to be cleared off. Now, in a perfect world, it's a payoff and that's all we have to deal with. But that's not always the case, which again is why I say, if you're representing a seller, know what you're getting into, know your clients, know what situation is going on. Are they married? Are they divorced? Are they getting a divorce? Is someone dead? There's so many different things that can go into that situation. And if you don't know it and we don't know it, and then we get the title commitment, because the title commitment is where we're going to see where this property's been, like Doug was talking about earlier, a marriage, and it takes about 20 days to figure out who's been sleeping with the property. Well, that's exactly what this is. So when we pull up the title commitment, we're going to be able to see who's vested on title. What that means is who currently owns the property. It needs to be your seller.
Yeah.
If Bob Smith is selling the property, Bob Smith needs to be vested on title. Okay? Are you wanting to
Yeah,
interject?
real quick, I mean, if you make an offer, we know that we need to have the agent full report in the tax roll. If the tax roll says that Stephen McClellan is the owner, but you're talking to Megan, that could be a contract for deed. And what that means is that the owner really doesn't, the person that you're talking to that thinks you're gonna list their home, you can't. Because they're basically like driving a car and paying off somebody else's car note. They're in that seller's house and signed something that never went to a title company. That basically is just like an installment plan that they're making payments, increasing the other person's equity, but they don't actually own the home. And that's the first telltale sign. I had it happen 1.5 years ago. And I looked at this donut shop owner and it was Oscar, but the owner said it was Steven. And I called Oscar and Oscar's like, oh no, I own it. And I was like, really? Tell me about it. When did you close? And he goes, oh, we never went to closing. We just signed in an office and Oscar signed something he didn't know he was signing that gave him no rights to own the property. So there's a lot of check marks and balances, and the biggest check and balance for us is always pull the tax roll. If we have an issue where it doesn't line up, you get in touch with Roxanne and she can even move it forward. Does that make sense?
Do the research on.
Yeah, to find out what's the story. And even call the seller and the person you were talking with who thinks they're the seller, but they're really not.
Well, and even, because I pulled Realist when I made an offer on my house last week, and what was in Realist was not the actual owner.
Yep.
So that's not always correct either.
Right.
So,
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Which
that's
is the
why,
tax roll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That happens a lot when somebody dies and it's inherited, like,
Mhm.
that's what I ran into.
I think this was a divorce, so it made it. But regardless, I had
For
to,
sure.
I had to.
All kinds of scenarios where it could
Mhm.
happen.
you're,
Maybe it's a flip
you'd be
and it hasn't
amazed.
been updated yet on the tax roll and it really could be legitimate, but most of the time it's not. There's something funny going on and it's a good time to,
But it's their job to figure it out.
that's
Yes.
right.
All right.
Because it's
It
always
is our
fun when
job to
someone's like,
figure it out.
oh, I'm not married. We're like, oh, yes, you
Yeah.
are.
There you go. Figure it out.
And that's something else that's on the seller information form is, are you married? Has your marital status changed since you purchased the property? That's something else a lot of people in Texas don't know. And I know we're dealing with a lot of people coming in from out of state, but Texas has, specific homestead laws. So let's say, this couple, let's say the husband bought the property before he was married. Okay. Now he's married. He married Callie. She moved in. It is her homestead. Things aren't going so well. Callie, they get a divorce and he or they're in the middle of a door. Long story short, if you've lived in the property as your homestead, doesn't matter if you were married when you bought it or not, that spouse is going to have to sign off on the property because it's a homestead property in Texas. And not all states are like that. That's why I always try to teach this at the closing table when I have them sign the warranty deed or their deed of trust if they're buying. Because a lot of times, let's say the wife is what's considered the non-purchasing spouse. She's not on the note, but she's on the deed of trust. You can't sell that property without her because it's her homestead. She has a homestead right. So these are all things that you're going to see throughout the transaction that are important, which is why when we talk about communication, know what's going on with your people. Okay.
I think that's great. What happens when, okay, so let's say we have the title commitment, and just to kind of make it to where we can all understand it, a title commitment is like you're dating somebody and you met them on January 1st. You want to marry them on January 28th, but you want to investigate them for about 20 days to see who they slept with. So what the title company does is look at the buyer and go, hey, we want to protect you and see who slept with the house. So they're going to go all the way and check the owners and all the written history. So they're going to issue a title commitment. Let's say that it was Dustin, who's the buyer, and they go, hey, you're golden. We have found everything. There's only one lien that beeped. There's only one lien, and we're going to pay it off at closing. So now he knows that at closing, the seller's lien is going to be paid off. And let's say the seller was Oscar. That's only good for the moment he opened it up. Because the moment after he opened it up, could Oscar put a lien on the house?
Yes, so.
And if it's only 20 days to get it to him, but closing's 30, aren't there 10 days where nobody knows what the hell's going on?
Right.
So if all of a sudden the plumber puts something in the house and he doesn't pay him, he's getting screwed because the title commitment didn't show that. So what she does is she gives Oscar an affidavit at closing that says, hey, is this your lien and the only lien? Because we're about to pay it off. And so when they pay it off, he thinks he has clear title. So when you come and knock on his door and you're a plumber, you're going to call Callie, first me, if I'm the realtor, and you, because you're going to tell the buyer at closing that we're family, and you're going to always fight for them. And for them, any issue, always call you. You'll call Roxanne, and Roxanne will call Oscar, the seller, and go, hey, did you have a plumber go out there 3 days before closing? And Oscar goes, oh my God, I remember, but I'm broke. I don't have the money. But I'm broke. I don't have the money to pay that lien. And she'll say, you better find it because we're going to sue you to pay it. But who will never pay it is him.
Right.
Because he'll be insured up to whatever that value is. That happens every day. And there are people that put liens on houses after that title commitment and lie on that affidavit. And then it comes back later, the buyer will always be protected, whether the lien is found or unfound. And I had it happen on my own personal house in '94. So I know how it works. And it's really important to be able to explain that if it ever arises, where a buyer says, hey, so if anybody ever says that the seller didn't pay a lien off, what's going to happen? Call me. I'll call her. They'll fight for you. And that's what a title policy is for.
And that, yeah, exactly. That's why you need title insurance, because if you didn't have title insurance, then the buck isn't going to stop with anyone. It's going to stop, it's going to be between the parties. In this scenario, it's going to stop with us, because if we didn't, we do what's called a bring to date. We can't fund a file unless we've ran title again in that gap to try to make sure things like that don't happen. But let's say we didn't and it slipped through, then it's on us. That's what we're doing, is we're ensuring that you as the buyer are getting the clear title. So just to hit a couple high points of the title commitment, because as the agent, you're going to see us send out the title package. And most often it's going to have the title commitment, the tax certificate, and like a prelim closing disclosure. So you're probably opening this title commitment and going, what the hell is this? So Schedule A is where you're going to see who's vested. That's where you're going to see who owns the property, whose name is on the property. Schedule B is where you're going to see any type of exceptions, easements, those types of things. A lot of that, most people kind of glaze over. It's a little bit hard to read, but we can if you wanted to get into it. We could spend a whole 30 minutes on a title commitment, so I'm not going to do that to you. Schedule C is where you're going to see what liens are on the property. So Schedule C, I usually go straight to Schedule A, and then I go straight to Schedule C, because I want to see what am I dealing with, who is vested, And what type of liens am I going to be working on? Is anyone, HOA liens, mechanic liens, anything that is tied to that chain of title, this is where it's going to show up. Anyone goes and files a lien with the county and says, you didn't pay me for painting your house, this is where it's going to show up. So this is what our title plant is doing. They're pulling any recordings, anything that's been filed on that property, and that's how we know what we have to clear.
If anybody's working with a buyer that's buying a lot and wants to know if, maybe it was changed to commercial, that would be a
Mhm.
D.
It was changed to
Like,
commercial.
like in their contract, we have an objection, like, hey, if we can't put a house on
Yes.
this lot, so that
Yes.
would be in B.
Yes.
So A and C are the most
Restrictions,
important, but then
yes.
restrictions. you look at
Restrictions
B
are
and-
going to be on B.
So, because sometimes y'all ask me that.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, are you talking about my, what's his name?
You and about 100 other agents. Yes, go ahead and talk about it.
My
Yeah.
dad, purchased property, and, it was zoned commercial as far as everybody could tell. It went through title, it transferred title to him as commercial, and then the city said, no, it ain't commercial, it's residential. So you're telling me that should have been on the schedule?
I can't tell you for certain, but Schedule B should have said any type of restrictions or anything like that should have been on it.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I mean, like I said,
On your title commitment, that should have been
I didn't look
referenced.
at my dad's title.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We didn't go through y'all, he used his friend. I recommend
That's the
it.
problem.
Yeah.
I would agree, but.
And there's scenarios where people want to know, can we park, a mobile home beside our house or
Yeah,
in
that's-
front
yeah, those are
or
normal restrictions.
Right.
I get that. I'm just. this
sounds
is
like
what I would get
something
to.
changed in there that,
Well, it's like the county has it zoned as commercial, and then the city said they changed it to residential in 2005. But, I mean, it's a 3,000 square foot lot. If you went to the city and tried to say, hey, I want to put a house here, they tell you piss off. They won't give you a permit for it. They won't give nobody a certificate of occupancy for a business because it's not commercial. Or it's like it's a worthless piece of land.
Well, that BS wouldn't have got by through the title.
Hell
Thanks,
no.
Dave.
that one's over my pay grade. No, I'm just kidding. But that's what, we have an attorney on.
He's talking to an attorney.
Okay.
So what
And
happened, if title company fails to find out who the real owner is?
how,
It happened with us, which house I'm selling,
okay.
so it was a foreclosure. So we bought the house for like 3 years back,
Okay.
and the title company probably didn't find out who was the owner,
Mhm.
and the husband sold it went to the foreclosure, and bank sold it to us with my husband and partner. And when we went to go to possession of the house, the lady who owns, she's like, I didn't sign any paper. And 3 years she didn't move, and she was a lawyer.
Well, that's different. She
Yeah.
actually sounds like she was foreclosed on, but she wouldn't move.
But we were not able to take her. She's like, I didn't sign the paper, like I didn't hand over, I was the equally.
Yeah.
But my husband didn't make a payment, so I didn't do anything, so she won't move.
Yeah,
So how
But I
can-
mean, well, it's gonna be an attorney. It's gonna be a legal process, but I mean, it went through foreclosure. She just said, I'm not moving. I didn't know he's a loser and he didn't make,
So she said title company didn't reach out to her, like I didn't sign the paper.
Title doesn't have to because it's
Yeah.
foreclosed on by the bank.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Right.
more of a.
Yeah, that's gonna
More
be
complicated than
illegal.
the training for today, kind of.
Oh, okay.
But we do have an attorney on, I was just about to say, we have an attorney here in our office and he helps deal with those types of questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't want to tell you something.
Cantions in the
that's-
house.
Oh,
Yeah.
So what
No.
happened?
Yeah, you definitely need to speak to an attorney on that one.
But we win the case, this is what
Okay.
I'm feeling. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I hope you cleared it up by now that you're
Yeah, but
selling it.
still it's worth it, market is so high, so we
No
will get
kidding.
double.
Strong. No, I think that's good.
All right,
That's why she's
so
doing it.
questions on title commitment? You're probably not even sure, right? What your question would be. But when you have one, call me.
When they owe a credit card, and it's in schedule, it'd be in schedule C, right?
Correct.
When they,
It would be, but in the state of Texas, that's considered an abstract of judgment. It's called an AJ. We can remove it most often because a credit card lien should not attach to a homestead.
That's
Right.
what I thought.
Now, if it's an investment property, then it could.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had it on Curry's, his wife, and,
And we removed them
yeah.
because it was homestead. But when an examiner pulls that, they're gonna pull anything that attaches to the property and to their name. And then it's up to us as the closer and the underwriter to clear it.
Y'all better do process.
This is why you learn, yeah.
You don't sleep, Lola.
Yeah, because I be starting, she don't sleep either. It's on each other overnight.
So after that, for us as the title company, once we know that we have a clear commitment, we're pretty much just kind of in a holding pattern until the lender is ready. At that point, the lender's working on the numbers. We're ready to go at that point.
Plug Ryan
Mhm.
at the end.
Yeah, so
Right.
Ryan
Brooke
is our,
Kelly's team.
Ryan's our third sponsor here today, so he's the mortgage person. And is with Brooks. What do y'all have, like 5 or 6 people that work with him, Brooks? 4.
12.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's always
Our
like,
team's about 12.
it's like Jesus and the disciples. So,
If you've got any lender questions and all, you can ask me or Brooks and we can take care of you 100%.
just the way you're sitting, you're very confident.
Where's the hand?
I'm feeling like that a year ago.
You weren't either.
Hey, she was.
Okay, so then
Of course, I wasn't either.
Yeah.
That's not my.
after survey, yeah.
Rough coach.
Right? Serious. Stop it laughing.
I don't know if it's in the same category. But I have a client where it was, a buyer's supposed to close, like, say for today, we did an addendum, supposed to close today, but we did. What happened?
Why aren't they closing? Because the lender's not ready, most likely, or the appraisal's not in.
Well, the survey was turned, we had to redo a survey,
Okay.
get another legal survey.
Uh-huh.
That was turned in, it's just today's the day that it should have been closed and then nothing.
And they're not
And I
ready.
just get a text say, well, we just dropped the ball and, I mean, but what normally,
Who you with, the buyer or the seller?
I'm with the seller.
Okay.
So you just eat that or something?
Well, I mean, today's a drop dead date, but if there's a negotiation going on between you and the buyer's agent with the 2 clients, you get another amendment and you make the closing
Extend the
change to
closing
Monday or
date.
Tuesday.
Okay.
Who told you it's going through title or the?
The buyer, I don't really like this
Mm.
company either, man.
Yeah.
They've been like.
Well, you'll just call the buyer's agent and say,
Yeah.
hey, what's going down? Are we dead? Or because you don't want to stroke them along, your seller. They're really not going to ever close, but if
Right.
you get an agreement, you're going to get an amendment.
Well, we've been doing amendments since, excuse my mic. It was supposed to close way back January 11, and we pushed back to 27, and we pushed back to the 11th again.
What about the lender? Have you talked to the lender? You specifically?
No,
For the buyer?
the buyer, no, I haven't. The buyer is actually like investment properties.
So
I
it's
guess
cash.
paying cash, cash buy.
Okay.
So,
So you need to talk to the buyer's agent,
okay.
find out what's going on and amend the contract if you're going to amend or.
Yeah.
Say,
But that's it. Basically,
Mhm.
if they want to keep them in, then they can. Is that
Well,
what
I
you're
mean,
saying?
if your client agrees to it,
Right.
if not, it'll be, in default.
And then what happens?
Well, it's a negotiation, but you might get their
Keep 'em in,
buyer's
you don't
earnest
wanna
money.
start over.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was just trying to understand.
Oh, no,
which
I
way to
think-
Go with it.
No.
it's
she-
not uncommon.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon. And
Okay.
I mean, especially right now, and Ryan can probably speak to this more than I can, but I know appraisals are taking a long time.
Yeah.
If people are needing new surveys, we need to know that up front or as soon as possible because surveyors are very busy right now. So just the process in general is just taking some time, so it's not uncommon to not close right on that date, but of course, everyone's working in that direction. But yeah, that sounds- But for a cash purchase, usually a cash purchase is quick and easy.
Yeah, that's what I, oh,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna touch on the closing disclosure. Anything you want to say prior to that?
Yeah, I mean, so when your buyer goes and meets with Ryan, they're gonna get something called an LE. which is similar to this, but not exact, because most of the time when your buyer gets pre-qualified or pre-approved, you haven't even shown them a home yet.
Right.
So all the ratios they're gonna use for taxes and insurance are just gonna be what they think the current tax rate is for the DFW area. But now you're under contract and 3 days before closing, you should get this. It's gonna be exact. So it will not be exactly the same, but it should be, within reason. The biggest thing I found on this, and she can expand on it, is, a government employee made this, not us or Roxanne. If Roxanne made it, she'd probably go, hey, you're the buyer and today's February 11th. You are going to get 30 days of January, 31 days of January, and 10 days of this month as a credit from the seller for the time they owned it from January 1st to February 11th. You clearly see it, oh, I'm getting a credit. And then right below it say that you're just going to be debited 3 months to have an escrow. But what it actually show is for the buyer, it'll show 5 months of debits that she's paying. Because you have to go like 4 pages to see the 3-month credit from the friggin' seller, because it's a government employee that made it. So it's a little complicated, not so much when you're a February close, but when you're like November, or not November, September. Because September is 9 months plus 3, they're gonna debit the seller. So on 1 page, it's gonna show 13 months of a debit to the buyer. And you're gonna have to go 2 pages to see 9-month credit from the seller.
You're talking about taxes?
Yeah, on the
Okay.
taxes. And so a buyer's gonna go, why am I getting debited 13 months for taxes? And you go, well, let's flip 2 pages. You're actually getting 9 back from the seller. It's kind of weird. So it's cumbersome. And really, at the end of the day, to dumb it down, you're gonna have your sales price, that's a debit. You're gonna have closing costs, that's a debit. And then over here, you're gonna have all your credits. It's gonna be the earnest and the option and the loan, and a credit towards some taxes. And then the difference is what they're gonna bring in the form of a cashier's check made payable to the title company, or more easily a what?
Wire.
A money wire.
Well, sometimes that ain't.
Yeah, go ahead.
Boy, do we know that.
Oh, yeah.
Roland and I have been through it together. Some not so technical clients. So when your client comes in, you're coming in with them for closing. Everyone needs to have valid ID.
That's
Meaning-
important.
Meaning non-expired driver's license or passport. Everyone has to have their ID. Their closing funds, cashier's check or wire, anything over $10,000, we don't require, but we highly recommend a wire. Just because cashier's checks still have to be verified because those funds could be canceled. So if your client wants to fund on the same day, we always request a wire.
Before a certain time, or?
I mean, they can do it in a perfect world. If we know they're closing funds the day before, they can wire it the day before.
Okay.
We're going to hold it in escrow. It's not going anywhere until they close. So it's perfectly safe and fine if they want to do that.
Is there a certain time on the day of closing that you don't want to wire after a certain time?
I mean, I would say anytime after around 3 o'clock, if you're buying or selling, we want to fund the same day. That's always the goal. So earlier in the day is always better to sign and send funds, but we can do it. It's just not preferred, especially when it's, month end is always busy for everyone. Then you're pushing the clock and we just can't. You got something you want to say?
Banks cut off their
Yeah,
wire
3.
transfer to it like 2 or 3.
Our cutoff is 4 o'clock to go out. So if we don't have our set up and in with our banking system prior to then, you're not going to see it till the following business day. We try really hard to get it out. I always try to fund on the same day if at all possible.
One thing I'll add on this to bring in Alan, and he can explain, but when you get your homeowner's insurance, generally speaking, because most Americans don't put 20% down because we're not a country of savers, we're going to be putting 3, 5, 10, 15 FHA. And that means that Ryan is the big risk taker when they're putting up 90, 95% of the loan. And they want to make sure that when a buyer moves in, if they forget their mortgage payment and 3 days after the home is struck by lightning, that they didn't just lose their asset. So that's when Alan comes in the picture, and tell them kind of what you collect up front and how it works every month.
I mean, that's pretty basic. We're looking at the value of the home. Now there's market values and sales prices, which can differ. We're strictly looking at if that lightning strikes and burns the home to the ground, how much does it cost to rebuild the home? We get that done. We send it over to Ryan so they can complete the packet.
is really kind of in a very basic form. There's a lot to it, but.
Now, you
money
charge
in the
a
water.
1 year in advance, don't you?
It is, and it's usually, now, this is where I get money in the water. I send it to Ryan, they get the packet, and they send it to you guys, and then you guys cut the check to the insurance company.
Okay, let me
And then
explain how it works,
then it's
just to
escrow.
make it more simple. You're gonna get, your buyer's gonna pay 1 year in advance on their insurance premium. So if the insurance premium is 2,400 for a year, it's collected at closing. It's paid for your buyer for 1 year. If they never make a mortgage payment and the home gets struck by lightning, it's covered because it was covered for 1 year in advance, the day of closing. If it was 2,400 a year, that's 200 a month. The first payment your buyer makes, if it's a under 20% down payment, they're gonna collect $200. That's a 12th. And that means after 12 12s, they collected how much? Another 2,400. It would be a year from their anniversary. Guess what paid another year in advance? $2,400. So even if you own a home, your insurance paid what? A year in advance always. So when you see closing costs and the buyer's like, oh my God, what's this? You're like, well, your insurance is always paid a year in advance. And then when you make your first payment, a 12th of that amount is taken out to start collecting for your anniversary. It's also important when you go list somebody's house to say, hey, Stephen, when did you buy your home? Oh, I bought it 5 years ago on February 11th. Really? Well, today's February 11th. Guess what just got paid today? Your next year's homeowner's insurance. Are you about to get a $2,400 refund when the home closes? Yeah, because it was just paid a year in advance on your anniversary of your closing date. So that's really important to ask a seller. And I always say that, like, hey, when'd you buy this home? And they always know. They always remember. You go, oh, well, that day, your insurance was paid a year in advance. So if you close December 31st, we've only covered 2 months of your insurance, so you're gonna get 10 months back. Does that make sense? Okay. Everybody good?
Same thing with your taxes when if they were escrowing, obviously, depending upon when they sell, but they're going to get their escrows back from their taxes as well after we pay off their mortgage. But that's a whole other.
Yeah, and this is a really good document to kind of understand the concept of a seller that's closing late in the year, but before November. Because in November, the taxes will be paid from the title company, most likely. But when you have a cash buyer closing on a house the end of September, because it's a cash buyer, that buyer is going to pay their own taxes every November. So closing on the end of September means the seller will be debited January 1st to September 30th. That money will be given to the buyer, but won't be put in an escrow account. It will be a direct credit towards that buyer's monies that they need. But what that buyer needs to remember is in another 30 days, they're paying the whole year's taxes because they got that as a direct credit. It never went into an escrow account because there was no lender. So early in the year, it doesn't matter. Late in the year, like when Dustin has a cash buyer, yeah, right. And so I was telling him, he was like, well, what are the ballpark closing costs for a cash buyer? And I was like, about $550. Don't be texting people about me. About $550. And I said, but that's going to be washed out with what?
The credit.
The credit from the taxes. And that's probably what's going to end up happening. So I'll be quiet so Lola doesn't text anybody about me.
I gotta leave early.
All right.
I'm sorry if y'all have any questions. Don't hesitate to reach in.
All right.
See you later.
Thanks.
Have a good one, man.
Make sure
See
y'all.
y'all. All right, Alan, be safe.
All right.
But those are the main things. I mean, I always like talking about that closing disclosure because it's like Latin. You gotta have a concept of the insurance and the taxes and you should be in pretty good shape.
And if you have a good lender, and I'm sure they do this, the first question I ask when I sit down with your clients and you at the closing table is, has your loan officer gone over your closing disclosure with you? More often than not, they have not. If they don't, I go over all of that, or we go over all of that with you. I always start on page 1. I start at the top, talk about their loan terms, their interest rate, their fixed rate. All of that is here. This is actually page 3. It's kind of out of order, but this is what Doug's been talking about. This is where you're going to see debits and credits. So this is where you're going to see their earnest money and their option money. And then this is the proration for taxes. So depending on the dates here, this is where you're going to see your proration for taxes. Page 2 is all just standard lender title fees. And then escrows are always going to be in this little section right here. So this is going to show you how many months is the lender collecting up front for taxes and insurance for next year's escrow account. So we go over all of this at the closing table. To me, this is one of the most important documents that they're going to sign because this is their money. This is their payment. This is their money. This is the terms of their loan. They're going to sign 100 other pieces of paper that no one gives a rip about. But if they understand this and they feel good with this, that their note and their deed of trust, and the rest is all attorney and lender documentation. But this is really what you want them to understand.
Can I have a copy of that? Should have just.
Yeah, absolutely. We can get you one.
Okay.
So once all this is signed, right here's your cash to close. So this is always if when we send out your closing disclosure to you or to your client, I always send out the closing disclosure prior to closing. Hopefully the day before, a couple days before. Let me know if you have any questions so that you can review it ahead of time. Send it to your client. They can look it over. That way everyone's comfortable and you're not, you don't know what's going on the day you get
If you
here.
have a client who's super attentive to detail, it will make the closing
Yes.
go faster.
Yes.
If you have it ahead of time.
Yeah, and I was also gonna say that when they send out the closing disclosure, sometimes your client may not see it in the midst of all the other emails that they're getting.
Mhm.
So you just wanna let them know, hey, title company sends the closing disclosure, please review it before closing. That way, like David said, there's no issues in closing.
Yeah.
Because you have some clients that want.
You'll sit there for 4 hours, somebody asking you about this line right here, and it's just like, let them read it before.
Yeah. If you have a reader, let us know. If you have a reader, we can send them the full package they're going to sign ahead of time and let them look over it. We can do that. So, and then do we have a seller's disclosure?
So, and the same thing y'all can do with buyer's tenant rep agreement, the listing, you can send those to your client before you get it. That way they can read it, so they know.
Seller's disclosure is just a little bit shorter and sweeter than the buyer's disclosure. I always say it's much more fun to sell than it is to buy. It's quick, easy, and they're getting money back, right? So that's the seller side. And then I think we have, and these are when there's a lender involved. If it's a cash closing, then we're going to close on what's called a settlement statement. We used to close on the old-fashioned HUD, which I prefer. Now we use settlement statements. There's no lender involved. It's just going to show you basically escrow fees, the title policy, recordings. That's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot on a cash closing unless there's liens or something we're having to take care of.
What's a good ballpark if somebody said, I'm working with a buyer, it's a cash transaction, like $550, if there's no title?
If they're not paying for title,
Like $550 or
$550, $600.
Yeah. So whenever you have a cash buyer and they go, hey, what are my closing costs? About $600. Now, if you have them paying title, it's gonna be, it's not gonna be quite 1%, but I use that because you're always gonna look good.
Mhm.
Because on a $60,000 home, a title deposit is like $340,
Click back to that.
most likely. And then on a $600,000, it's probably $3,800. But I like to say it's $6,000 because it'll make you look good.
And actually, that's this right here. So this will show you title insurance premiums based on the price of the home. We can shoot this to you in a PDF. We had these
Right there,
printed.
600,000, 3,400.
There's your title
I
policy
said
amount right
38,
there.
So either way, what I mean.
Is this, so let's say like the client closes with another type of company, is that number still the same?
Yes.
It's regulated by the state.
It's regulated by Texas Department of Insurance, as are most of our fees. So whenever you're shopping around for title, I always say to people, it's really about relationships and it's about who do you trust? Who do you want to work with? Because at the end of the day, there's only a couple fees that I can negotiate with you on. The rest of it, it's regulated by the state. So it's who you want to work with. Who do you know that's going to get the job done? Yeah.
Who's responsive?
Yeah.
That's the biggest one.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
Especially when you do.
We can send you this whole package if you want. We can do it however.
We'll go print some right now.
I'll let you know.
Check your phone.
That and the, type, the.
We can make like a whole packet for y'all. So that really
All
pretty
right, let's
much.
talk a little bit about it and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
This will be a perfect hour. We got 7 minutes.
Okay.
So, Again, at the day of closing, you should have already got the CD. That's 3 days before. You should schedule a walkthrough. You gotta communicate with the agent. You just show up. You gotta make an appointment, do a walkthrough. And you've already told the buyer, hey, bring your driver's license, and did you wire the money or you get in a cashier's check? I mean, people show up with a cashier's check made up to the seller. I mean, that's not gonna fly. So the cashier's check needs to be made out to the title company. When you walk in, like she said, they gotta have a driver's license. I'll never forget, about 5 years ago, I had an old man that was moving here from Oklahoma, cash transaction. Backward ass hillbilly, didn't know how to do wires.
Damn.
So he went up to his bank the day of closing, 3:30 closing. He left this morning, went to Oklahoma City, had the bank supposedly wire it to the title company. When he walked into the bank, the only wire person, because it was a backwards ass deliverance town, was on vacation. So some spare did a wire and screwed it up. So at 3:30, they come driving in with a U-Haul packed with all his crap from Oklahoma. In the back, he had taken his safe and put it in the back of the van. We walk in, he's got his driver's license expired. And I'm there with his son, who was kind of helping him because he's a little, not quite there. But he was enough quite there to be, actually signed. So I said, well, do you have anything? And he has his passport. So it's expired. Because he's 90, he hadn't driven in 30 years.
Right.
And he hasn't traveled. So I said to the son, I was like, well, do you have anything in the U-Haul? And he's like, well, he's got a safe. So he goes in the safe and brings out a stack of passports that thick. Well, if the one he presented was expired, these were from like 1915, like Great War. World War II, the first war.
Wow.
And so finally, I looked at the closer, and I didn't know her like I know Roxanne. And I was like, give me a break, man. He's 100 years old. He's bringing a wire. I was like, and she goes, we'll make an exception. I was like, oh, well, that's so nice of you. After we spent 30 minutes scrummaging through a U-Haul for a friggin', passport. So yeah, it's important to make sure that people know that because, they don't buy homes regularly or sell. So anyways, she goes through all this. There's really only one document that you're going to have trouble with sometimes explaining. And, Roxanne's a professional, so she'll know how to explain it. But I've gone to a lot of closings where the person closing me, they were backlogged, and I said, I don't care, put Daffy Duck in there. I'll explain all the crap and get them to sign it. And they're going to pass over the deed of trust. And the deed of trust is about, that thick. And all you got to do is look at your buyer. And I do Pepe Le Pew's voice because I love him. He was outlawed for sexual conduct last year, but he's a cartoon character. He wasn't real, and he hit on a cat, and he was a male skunk. I grew up with. But I do it in this voice, and I just look at Steven, if he's my buyer, and I go, it basically says, you know that, you know that. And that's really all it has to say. And once they sign that, you're golden. She's gonna leave and go make copies of everything. You've got about 15 minutes by yourself with the buyer. And this will conclude the training. You need to look them dead set in the eye and go, hey, congratulations on buying a piece of America. There's not many countries that allow you to buy land from the core to infinity, but you just did. And I think it might be swell to get a will because you just put some money down, make sure nothing happens to where you could lose that and the government decides where your property goes. Hey, why don't you stop by Home Depot, go to the garden aisle and get a what?
A soaker hose.
A soaker hose. And look at Steven. And that's something that is a green or black hose with a bunch of holes in it. And you put it about 3 inches away from the foundation. And you turn it on about once every 3 days in the summer because our homes move, because we have clay. It just keeps moisture against the slab. Okay? And then the last thing I say is we're family. I want to work with all your family and visit your friends. I'm greedy for knowledge and money and everything. And I say it almost like that because there's nothing wrong with greed if it's going to help you help others. And so just say, hey, the same passion I use with you, I'll use with your family. So anything you get in the next 2 weeks, mail that says for $95 they'll file your homestead, take a picture and text it to me because I'll probably do a 1-word reply, trash, because that homestead now, right, can be done anytime. With the
Your
new,
homestead exemption?
yeah, with the new
It
rules.
still has to be done by April 30th, but it will apply the same year.
Right, so it'll apply the same year. So let the title closer explain it unless you know it well, because I just screwed that up. But and again, I'm always learning. But they changed it from last year, and so yeah, that's a free thing. And I've got buyers to this day, 5 years later, every mail they get, they text a ticket that has to do with the house and a bill. And I usually just say, oh, it's just spam, trash.
Right.
And then you shake their hand and, you know, maybe follow on social media. That's the contact manager that never changed. I mean, you can change your email 5 times, but people don't change their social, generally speaking. And you always post real estate, always. Not that you love Joe Biden or Donald Trump, or that you wanted to march on January 6th, or, you know, you're gonna picket people. Nobody cares about that crap. So a lot of real estate, to where randomly if something happens in their lives, they turn on social media like, oh, Steven, that's my real estate guy. And it happens like that. Any one of us can go get a checkup on a skin and say it's cancer, and all of a sudden we want to sell our house, or our sibling dies, or we get in a car wreck, or we get a divorce or a job promotion. So you always got these people that statistically in DFW, somebody, not as much anymore, but sells about once every 7 years. So that means with Oscar, he's in his 20s. He looks at somebody he's working with the same age. He could be helping them with 6 or 7 houses throughout his real estate career. And if he has that mentality, then it's almost like he doesn't want to work with me if it's the only sale I'm going to give him. And when you have that, because that, does that make sense? Yeah, for the long term. But now I'm not. So, but we'll cancel the training at a perfect hour, and I think that's great. And I really appreciate. And then we'll answer any questions. It'll answer any questions you have.
And I put my card on the table, so please take that information, put it in your phone, save me, text me, call me.